Welcome back. Let's touch on a subject of network monitoring and showing one of the ways of how it can be done. Now, before, when we covered endpoint security, we mentioned a tool called Wireshark. It helped us discover connections made from our endpoint device, and we also managed to see which protocol was being used and to where was our device connecting to or communicated with. Now, let's go over these monitoring tools once again and mention how they can be also applied to network and not just to an endpoint device. So there are a couple of tools that can be used for network monitoring. We have Wireshark, which has the GUI interface, and we have tools such as TCPDump or Tshark, which are command line and easier to run. Now the next question arises. If we use the same tools that we use for endpoint security to monitor just one device, how can we then use it for network monitoring as well? Well, the important thing is from where you are running these tools. If you run from an endpoint device, just like we did before, then you can only monitor traffic from that device. But if you run these tools from a router or firewall, then you will be able to monitor the traffic from all the devices inside that network, since all their traffic has to go through the router first in order to reach the destination, right? Well, that's the only difference, the spot from where we run the monitoring tools. This is also useful in case, for example, you have a malware running on an endpoint device. That malware could technically be programmed to evade your monitoring tools if you run them on that endpoint device as well, so you might not be able to see the correct network traffic like that. But if you run the monitoring tools from your router, then no matter how good the malware is on that endpoint device, it still isn't affecting the router, so you could see the valid traffic going from that machine and coming to that machine. Now comes the second problem, which is running the tools from the router. Well, this is a rather easy thing to do. If your router or firewall doesn't have a GUI option to see network traffic, which many don't have, then you have to log into your router, whether it being through an SSH or something else, and run the command line monitoring tools from there instead. In this particular video, let's take a look at TCPDump, which is a command line tool. Now for this tutorial, I will run the tool from the Kali Linux, but all the commands and methods are exactly the same, no matter which device you're running it on, so you can use the exact same commands on your router. Just use something like an SSH to log in, and then you will be able to execute commands on the router as well. So it doesn't matter whether you run it on an endpoint device or the router, the syntax and the commands are the same. Now on some routers the TCPDump will be installed, but on the others you might have to install it first, and once you do install it, you can type the command tcpdump -h in order to check out all the settings that you can run, or in other words, to see the help menu with the current available options. Now, the first thing that you want to run is tcpdump -d, and this command simply shows us which interfaces we have on this machine. So if you run it on your router, you will see the interfaces that your router has. Since I'm running on my Kali, I will see the interfaces that my Kali Linux have. You will also see which of these interfaces is up and running, and for me particularly, this is the interface that is up and running and that's mostly active. Once you choose an interface that is active, you can run this simple command, so tcpdump -i and then the interface name. In my particular case, it is ETH0. In your case, it might be something else. And this command will simply sniff all the traffic on this interface. Now, if you're on a router, you might not get this permission error, but for me, I have to run this with sudo in order for it to work. Type in my password, and now it will start listening and sniffing all the network traffic on this particular interface. Now we can see nothing is really coming in, but if I open another terminal right here and then I run, for example, ping 192.168.1.1, we get some traffic right here, and we can even see that we're getting the ICMP request from the Kali Linux machine that is pointed to this domain, which in this particular case is my router. Now, if you don't want to see the domains, maybe you want to see the IP addresses, you can run this command instead, TCP-I ETH0, and we can also add -n, so it shows us the IP addresses and the ports. If I press enter, and if I type the same ping command, now you will see that we do get an IP address instead of the domain. So we get 192.168.1.1, which is the IP address that I pinged, and we do get that it is an ICMP packet right here. We also get some ARP requests and replies on the network. And in some cases, this might be a little bit harder to read, but after a certain time, you will get used to it. Now, besides this, you could also filter the traffic by a port number, for example. If you want to filter a specific port, you could do TCPDump -n for IP addresses instead of domains, then -i, and we choose the interface, and we could type destination or DST port 80, for example. Oops, I typed 89, so port 80. And I need permission once again, so let's type sudo, and now it's listening only for port 80, and it will not output any other traffic. For example, if I go ping, you will see now nothing is being showed right here, since ping requests are not being registered over the port 80. Now, let me go and, for example, start Firefox. And here it is, the Firefox started, and we do get some HTTP traffic over the port 80. We also get on which IP addresses is it connecting, and it can go a little bit fast sometimes, so you might want to scroll up in order to catch something, but currently we only see that the Kali Linux machine is making connections to certain IP addresses over port 80, and that is due to the fact that I started Firefox. For example, if I want to visit my router login page, which is HTTP, it will capture it right here. Here it is. We can see that the connection from Kali Linux machine has been made to 192.168.1.1 over the port 80. And here is the router login page. Okay, awesome. Now, you could also do the same for HTTPS by removing the port 80 and typing 443, or you can type port 80 or port 443 in case you want to monitor both of these ports. This is the command to monitor both of the ports at the same time, so if I run it, now we will also see connections made from the 443 port, which should be any HTTP website. So let's, for example, visit facebook.com, and here it is. We get a bunch of traffic, but all of the traffic, as we can see, 443, and it's going rather fast, so let me just cancel this so we can inspect it. And here it is, port 443, port 443, and here is the time where the connection was made, so from our Kali Linux IP to the Facebook's IP address over port 443. And we can also see the incoming request back that Facebook sent to us. Okay, let me clear the screen so we get rid of this mess. And if you wanted to see whether any external traffic, for example, is coming to your own network, you could run this command. So TCPDump -i for the interface. I choose the interface ETH0, and you could type afterwards this syntax, which is not source, and then net, and then the entire network of yours, which in my case is this one. Once I press enter, you will see nothing is coming in, but since we have Firefox started, if I refresh this page, we will see a bunch of requests coming in. But if I try to ping, for example, ping 192.168.1.1, this will not be registered since this right here is network traffic inside the network. So I'm pinging my own router, so this will not be registered right here. Only the external network traffic, so this can be useful to, for example, see whether any of the device on the network is communicating with any external website or a device, which can also be useful if you want to see whether some device is communicating with a malware. Okay, nonetheless, these would be the basics of the TCPDump tool. Once again, to see its available options, you can run TCPDump-H, and you could also type TCPDump or man TCPDump to open the full manual where you can read all the available options in greater details if you want to learn this tool even more. Nonetheless, I will close this, I'll leave it up to you to read it, and if you want to get into network monitoring, this would be the start of it. Nonetheless, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next lecture.